This is Patrick Russell. I'm interviewing Anthony Nichols for the first time. This interview is taking place on August the 12th, 2021, and we are in Manhattan, Kansas. This interview is being conducted by the Making History Project. How you doing today, Tony?
I'm doing great, thank you.
All right. And can you tell us where you were born?
I was born in Asheville, North Carolina.
And what's your birthday?
December 20th, 1965.
And when you were growing up, can you describe it for me? What was it like?
Sure, we may have to deal with that dog. My father was an airline pilot, my mother was a stewardess, and I grew up in Marietta, Georgia, in a subdivision with a golf course, and a swimming pool, and so my upbringing was not strenuous or hard or anything. It was a pretty normal, good, solid upbringing. Let's say that.
Mm-hmm. And how big was your family?
It's just my brother and I, and my mother and my father. We were both still alive and both still married.
Okay. And growing up, did you have any hobbies or play any sports?
I did. I played basketball and baseball all through varsity level in high school. And that was pretty much, I was in marching band for a period of time, but that was about it.
All right. Any hobbies?
No real hobbies until later in my Army career when I started doing stained glass mosaics, which is what I do now as a full-time job as an artist. So, dreams really do come true.
Okay. And so you went to high school. Where did you go?
I went to Berkeley Prep in Tampa, Florida. My father, when I was a sophomore in high school, got transferred to Florida. So I finished high school in Tampa, graduated from Berkeley, and then went to FSU and graduated from there with a degree in fashion merchandising.
All right. And what year did you graduate high school from?
1984.
And then you became a Seminole?
I did. I was.
All right. You did a...
Absolutely.
And when did you graduate from there?
1988. Relatively on time.
All right. And what did you do then?
For a year, I worked in retail. I was a fashion merchandising major. And there's two tracks you can do in that career field, which is buying or store management. And I went to store management for about a year, and I worked for two different companies. And I was engaged to be married, and I just came to the realization that I just didn't want to do that. So I wanted a little bit more adventure in my life, so I enlisted in the Army.
Okay. And why did you pick the Army?
Well, I tried to get in the Navy flight program originally, but I didn't make it in that. So I thought, well, maybe I'll try to get into helicopters in the Army. So I'll do an enlistment and fill out my paperwork while I'm in the Army. So I enlisted as a cavalry scout. And as soon as I enlisted and went to basic training at Fort Knox, Kentucky, I got assigned to Germany, 3-8 Cavalry, 3rd Armored Division. Desert Storm kicked off. So
okay.
As soon as I got into my operational unit, we deployed to a war.
All right. So what year did you enlist?
1990, April of 1990.
And then Desert Storm happened in 90.
Yeah. They invaded Kuwait, I think, in August of 1990.
Yeah. All right. So you did your basic training. How was that for you?
Not, it was obviously strenuous, and it's an indoctrination program, and I was all for it because I'd grown up playing sports my whole life, and it's something I wanted to do, something I wanted to be successful at. So I threw myself into it full tilt.
And were you a bit of an outlier in that you were a college graduate enlisted with?
Yes.
With a bunch of other like 18-year-olds probably.
Yeah, the enlisted ranks is not for the faint of heart, and I caught a lot of flack for that. A lot of people didn't like me because of it, but I also got promoted faster. So, yeah.
All right, and then did you do advanced training after basic?
Just the cavalry scout AIT, and then I went to my line unit.
All right, so tell me a little bit about what type of training you're doing for cavalry.
I was a Bradley fighting vehicle scout. It's an M3 cavalry fighting vehicle, 25 millimeter gun, coaxially mounted 7.62 machine gun, and a tow missile launcher with 2 tow missiles. And I was the driver initially. That's what my job was during Desert Storm. So in AIT, we learned how to load the missiles and ride in the back, because you'll dismount and be a scout, OP, call in artillery, all that. So it's a great MOS. A lot of fun.
How thick is the armor on the Bradley?
From what we understood, we were kind of getting some reports that it took a hit from a 57 millimeter anti-aircraft gun. It did penetrate any kind of small arms. It'll save you from. It won't take a hit from a tank unless you got reactive armor on it. But it's fast and maneuverable, and that 25 millimeter in an urban setting is a man-killing gun. I mean, just amazing.
How fast does the Bradley go?
About 55 miles an hour on a hard surface.
Is it tracked?
It is tracked. You'll be shedding some track pads for sure. But we raced some British warriors out in the desert after the fighting stopped at Desert Storm, and we won, but we had to replace the track pads after that.
Okay. So you end up shipping out to, I guess, originally Kuwait, right?
Correct.
All right. And what was your mood at that point? Was this something that you were looking forward to, or a little bit apprehensive that it happened so fast?
I was excited about it because, when I chucked my life, everybody thought I was crazy and, what is this guy doing and all that. And so I was excited. It was an adventure, and that's what I joined to do. So I'd never been to the Middle East before or any of that, so this was exciting. Yeah.
Are you married at this point?
No, I'm single.
Okay. So I was wondering if your wife would have shared that same enthusiasm. Okay. And so when you go to Kuwait, are you still the driver?
Well, I started out as the guy in the back, the scout, the dismounted scout, but the guy who was the driver, he made a mistake that broke the vehicle in a certain way. So my track commander was so mad at him that he fired him from the driver's position and moved me up into it. So that's how I got the job.
And walk me a little bit through about driving the Bradley. Is there a steering wheel, or is it got levers?
It's like a U-shaped yoke. If you were looking at it, it looks like that. You've got 2 giant pedals because you're supposed to be able to operate the accelerator and the brake while wearing mop gear with these big boots on. So it's big pedals. You feel like a kid driving your grandparents' car.
All right. And so you get over to Kuwait about when?
We got there. We left on Christmas Eve from Germany, and it was snowing. And we got to stopped in Frankfurt and Kuwait, and yeah, so probably around Christmas Day we got there, maybe the 26th of December.
And what unit do you belong to at this point?
I was in a scout platoon of 3rd of the 8th Cavalry, 2nd Brigade, 3rd Armored Division, 7th Corps. Well, we were in 5th Corps in Germany, but when we deployed to Desert Storm, we were assigned to 7th Corps.
And where were you in Kuwait?
We very briefly just at the port is all I remember, because we had to paint all our vehicles tan color and apply our logos and the battle numbers and all that on it. I was, of course, because I was a private, on a detail to do that. So
All right. And so then what happens? You ship off to where?
We got in our vehicles and immediately deployed out to what's called Tap Line Road in Saudi Arabia. And we were guarding the roads that everybody else was coming in, and going to their units and assembly areas in Saudi Arabia. So we were just kind of out there, guarding the desert in the event that, it was nothing really happened. Mm-hmm. And then once we got all our gear, the unit was assembled, then we loaded up and went into our assembly areas out in the middle of the desert in Saudi Arabia, I believe it's the southern desert. I have to look at a map, but I was a contractor in Saudi Arabia a few years ago, and I went out there and looked around. It's pretty desolate. It's just flat. There's nothing there.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where we stayed for a couple of months, and we moved around here and again. But then we started doing rehearsals for the invasion, and but we lived outside in that desert for 6 months, just intense. You know,
Does it get cold at night?
it was cold and rainy when we got there. It sure was, and we were wearing all our winter gear: parkas, weather boots. I mean, I wore a hooded parka for 2 months because it was freezing. Because that wind never stops. You got a 15-mile-an-hour wind. You know, I'm pulling guard duty at 3 in the morning. It's cold, yeah.
Oh. And the threat of biological weapons or nerve gas, do you have to walk around? You didn't have to wear your...
No. We just carried our mask and we had our mob gear nearby because the way we operate is we would always be attached to a tank company, which is 14 M1 tanks, because 38 Cavalry was just an all-tank unit. We were there to just go, you know, choke the life out of the Republican Guard. And so we would be in a big assembly area, probably the size of about 5 city blocks, in a circle, and the headquarters element's in the middle, so we're in that, you know, assembly area.
And, okay, so then you're training for the invasion, and I guess you're coordinating with your tankers, right? The tanks?
Correct. I was just a private, so I'm just maintaining the vehicle and all that, but our lieutenant was always at the meetings getting the plan, you know. And then,
Right.
you know, check, recheck, you know, guard duty. So our missiles didn't catch up to us till we were in Saudi Arabia, so we had to load missiles and all that.
And what was the mood like during these training exercises on the eve of the invasion?
Everybody's different. You know, some guys were scared, upset, nervous. You know, some guys, you know, back then they were volunteer career soldiers, so they were very professional. There was no, you know, hesitate about anything. I mean, history probably has shown that army was so well trained, our army, that when they said, go here, do this, and they went and did it. I mean, just merciless killing machines. So these guys were very professional. That's what I noticed about them. They had their routines and SOPs down. Nobody said no.
Mm-hmm. What did you ever interact with the actual tanks, the tank commanders?
A little bit, not much. I mean, I was a private, so I was on a pretty short leash with my NCOs. We'd always hang out and talk to them. I partied with a few of them in Germany, so yeah.
What were they like as a group? So from your perch as a private now, looking up to them, what were they like?
Well, because we were scouts, we thought we were better than them. That's something to keep in mind. They were like, but I always admired that machine. And ironically, I became a tanker after that. After watching what they did in Desert Storm, I applied myself to be an armor officer on tanks because I thought they were so cool. You know, so I always wanted to check out their vehicle, you know, because it's just amazing.
And why does the scouts think they're better than the tanks?
Because scouting is more dangerous than tanking.
Because you have less firepower and you're by yourself.
That's right.
And you're first contact.
And right, we, you know, when things start happening, everybody gets along. Everybody works just fine. It's all just camaraderie.
All right. So what happens next then for you?
Well, we did the rehearsal, and then we went to our staging positions right against the berm to Iraq. And our brigade was lined up in 6 lanes. They blew 6 holes in the berm, which was about 12 feet high, just dirt piled up, but lots of dirt, you know, a wall of it. So they blew 6 lanes about the size of my house. And then each lane had a scout platoon vehicle. My 6-vehicle platoon was in front of each of these openings, and everybody lined up behind us. So sometimes you see these pictures of this massive array of armor and trucks and everything. And that was taken from the back of my Bradley fighting vehicle by a reporter who came up and because it was just awesome. So I'm in front. I was like, now they were kidding about this scout stuff because I've been in the Army less than a year at this point, you know. So when they said go, these MLRS launchers sprinted in front of us once they got through.
What are MLRS?
Big rockets gigantic rockets. I think each launcher has 8 rockets. So they went in front of us, stopped, and then fired massive volleys, and it was an artillery raid. So we drove for, and when the brigade got clear of the berm, we went to a brigade wedge. And there was my battalion was the right side of the wedge, 418 infantry was the left side, and 28 cav was in the front. So we drove for 3 days like that. We'd stop for a couple hours at night, and we're in our mob suits and all that. We didn't have masks on. And we're driving really slow. And Frederick Frank was our commander, the corps commander. He was worried about being ambushed. I'm like, by who? This is the largest array of armored vehicles in the history of the world. Let's go, So anyway, we probably on the third day at about 5 o'clock in the afternoon, there was helicopters in front of us, doing an aerial screen. But there's nobody in front of us. I mean, sometimes I have to stop and get on my turret with binoculars to see my wingman so I can orient off him and, make sure we're all still seeing each other.
How far have you advanced up to this point?
In the end, it was around 300 miles. We never stopped except for the fuel.
So you went 300 miles with no contact?
Well, on the third day, we got contact.
But up to 300 miles so far?
Well, yes, we did. We actually ran into a lot of people surrendering. And we at first we started to deal with them, but then we're like, there's too many, we got shit to do. So we just kept pushing them back to the rear. And then we ran into a bunch of dead people because the Republican Guard were machine gunning the conscripts who were trying to surrender, so they wouldn't surrender. So we saw a lot of dead bodies, and then that was the first contact that the scout platoon in front of us had, like off to the left. They shot one of these BMPs and destroyed it that was going around machine gunning the people surrendering. And then on the third day, the air cav doing the screen, he flies back. I'm like, oh. And then we get a radio call that says, enemy detected 15 kilometers to your front. You have 30 minutes to prepare for combat operations. So we get out, check the vehicle, check the weapons. I've got a AT-4 anti-tank rocket launcher here. I've got magazines in all my pockets, a knife. I'm ready to go, so.
How was that moment now? So now it was real. Like,
yeah.
Before it was still real, but now it's like really real. Now you're telling there's somebody there.
Yeah, it was unique.
Yeah.
Very unique.
A little more tension and adrenaline.
But now you're thinking about, okay, because all you're thinking about, make sure everything works in my combo so I can listen to what he wants me to do, and then, okay, if I get the vehicle shot out from under me, I can still get out and fight, You're just thinking about the task at hand. But afterwards, you always, when you're not in that moment and you don't have the armor on that being indoctrinated gives you, you realize what that moment was, and it was significant.
Now, you're also not driving blindly into the desert, right? I mean, there's planes that have kind of mapped out the area and kind of are looking for where they are, right?
Right.
Okay. Now you know where they are, and you're still going to be the tip of the spear as the scout?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So we got everything ready to go. Everybody picks up a scan, and sure enough, we start receiving artillery fire. Because they put a couple companies of mech infantry in blocking positions because the Republican Guard was trying to get out of Kuwait. So they're going to try to block us. Well, when we approached them, most of them were facing the other way. The first people we hit. But these guys knew we were coming. So artillery, RPG trails, machine gun fire. I mean, probably it seemed like a long time, but in reality, it was probably about 5 to 7 minutes.
Are you moving at this point or stationary?
Both, depending on what was going on, what people saw. My platoon was engaging, and I'm driving. My visibility is not what they're seeing. I'm looking through a periscope this big, so I'm just doing what they tell me to do. We did stop at one point, and then as soon as we stop, a tank company goes by us at 55 miles an hour, throwing sand up. Boom, 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 boom. And turrets start coming off tanks. Shit starts exploding, and then they stop.
Not their tanks.
No,
the other
the
tanks.
enemy tanks.
Yeah.
And that's when I was just like, oh, holy. So then we pushed to the flank, and now we're flank security, but the tanks we're all right here. And then at some point when we figured out they were shooting artillery over us and over them, and driving the forces behind them into us. So we all, as a brigade, a 9-kilometer long line of tanks and Bradleys, just shooting. And it's nighttime now. And the planes are overhead, starting at about 20,000 feet, circling down, doing patterns, dropping ordnance on these guys. All night. And finally they let me pop my hatch open so I could watch. I'm looking through the screen. And
when you say a screen, is this still digital though, or no?
No, it's just the way the periscopes work in the armored vehicles, tanks, Bradleys, APCs. It's a mirror system.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking at a periscope here, like this.
That's still the same technology from World War II, basically.
Well, as a result of their experience with drivers like me, and we provided input after the war, they have a new system. And that's what they've got on Fort Riley now. It's digital. They've got a infrared. He's got a screen, a real screen, camera. Amazing.
Okay. All right. So you basically that night watching fireworks.
A lot, and I saw, there was a large group, probably about 50 to 100 guys that were walking towards us to surrender. And they had, CBU dropped on them, cluster bombs. I was like, oh, you didn't need to do that. Ironically, the guy that called in that airstrike, I served under him as an officer later in my career. But for the most part, they shut their vehicles off and got underneath them. I mean, but I probably saw more people get killed in that one night than I did the rest of my Army career, right in front of me.
How far away were you?
Probably about a kilometer and a half. And then the next morning, off we go. Keep going. We drive through those guys.
Through the wreckage.
Yeah, through the wreckage. And then we spent about 2 months in Iraq. We went through our objective and did what we were supposed to do. And then we just stayed there for another couple months. I left on May 16th. Yeah, so hot. But we lived in the tents and outside the whole time we were there.
So overall, how long were you in Iraq during that time?
6 months.
All right. And in terms of like active combat during that first week, how long were you doing that for? 4 days? And it was over.
Yeah. Be all you can be.
And you end up seeing a lot of wreckage, I guess.
You're welcome, Kuwait.
Yeah.
Well, you learned not to go near the ones that were destroyed by tanks or A-10s because they've got depleted uranium dust on them. But oh yeah, we did some serious souvenir hunting in the trench lines. That was probably dangerous too, but.
And what was your most memorable moment from that operation? Was it that night of the fireworks, quote unquote, or was there something else?
I would say it was when the tanks pulled up and there was a tank that had come over the hill in front of me, probably at about, I would probably say 1,700 meters. And he was moving. I think it was a T-55. And he was moving this way, and that tank fired, and there was a big plume of sand behind him, and the tank kept moving, and I was thinking to myself, he missed. How could you miss? And then the tank stopped. Then the hatches blew open, and Flames shot out like 12 feet in the air, out the gun tube, and just burned. I mean, just burned for a good 5 minutes. And when it stopped burning, these idiot tankers just kept shooting it. It must have got shot 20, 30 times.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right. So after about 6 months, then you return back to the States?
Right. Well, I went back to Germany first.
Germany.
And we were closing out our bases there because they shut down 3rd Armored Division. So I closed down my base at Gelnhausen and then came back to the States to Fort Stewart.
All right. Fort Stewart's located where?
In southern Georgia, near Hinesville.
Right.
Great division. It was a 24th Infantry Division, which did prominently in Desert Storm at that time. And I was in Alpha Troop 24 Cav for a year. I did a rotation in Panama with them. You know, I was just an enlisted guy. I was an E4 by then. And I decided I was going to go to officer candidate school. So I finished my application. And from there, after about 3 years, I went to officer candidate school.
All right. And what year was that?
That was 1992, September 1992.
All right. And where did you go?
I went to Fort Benning, Georgia, for officer candidate school. We started out with 147 people in my class, I think. And officer candidate school at that time was just an exercise of kind of hazing, and we would do physical training twice a day instead of once. Most people got injured, and I gutted it out and got a commission. So, yeah.
And you came out as what, a first lieutenant?
Second lieutenant.
Second lieutenant.
And I was married at that time, and I was able to go back to the exact same unit that I came from at Fort Stewart, and I was a tank platoon leader, scout platoon leader, and then I was divorced at that time. And then I got orders to go to Korea as a first lieutenant, and I was dating a lovely young lady, Janet, and kind of interrupted our relationship. So when I got to Korea, I proposed to her and told her to come to Korea. So she did. She came to Korea and lived with me. I got promoted to captain in Korea, and we got married, and we're still married.
All right. So you're Korea, and you're what, on the DMZ?
Camp Casey, which is I think 12 kilometers from the DMZ. It's pretty close. And I was in one of the tank battalions there, 2nd of the 72nd. Great unit, great outfit. Did our part there.
And as a captain, what are you doing on a day-to-day basis there in Korea?
I was the executive officer first for Alpha Company, and there you just make sure the tanks are maintained properly. There's enough stuff in the supply room. The company has what it needs. You're like the operations guy. Then I was the S4, which is the battalion logistics officer. Did a year in Korea and came back.
Any exercises though?
Just the ones they have every year. There's one called Full Eagle. We do that. The best thing to do at Korea is gunnery, because it's right close by to they can hear you shooting in North Korea, and you get a lot of bullets in Korea to practice with. Lots of different scenarios you can do, because Korea is very constrained terrain. So we would run ranges where the tank commander would literally have to throw the gun over the side, boom, shoot something that's like 500 feet away. You never do that in the States. Like gunfighting in the mountains with a tank is fun.
Mm-hmm. All right. And what is your role in the tank? Are you
I was a
in
tank
the
commander
field?
as an officer.
So do you have your own tank?
Yes.
All right. And
As
so
a captain, you're a company commander. You have 14 tanks. That was the
All right.
most fun.
But you actually get to sit in one.
Yeah,
You get to tell
I have a tank.
not only your tank, but the rest of them what they should be doing.
The commander does that. As the executive officer, I have a tank, and I'm with the headquarters element, and I'm basically, my tank is there to guard the headquarters element.
Got it.
So that's kind of how that works.
Okay. All right. And so, nothing. Did anything happen? Any tensions in that time period happen?
It's always tense there. In fact, some of the fun things that happened when I was there was, there was a midget submarine that got beached there, and all the guys, the commandos killed the submarine crew and then tried to escape into the country, and they tracked them all down. But they had pictures of our motor pool on them when they killed them. And the North Korean Special Forces sometimes sends their graduates across the border to do infiltration missions. That's a graduation exercise. So yeah, it's always a little bit strange over there.
And so, I mean, if during one of these graduation ceremonies, U.S. forces were to see those gentlemen running amok, what are their orders?
Well, it's not like they have a uniform on. Half the time they're dressed like Katusas, which is the South Korean, volunteers that work with us in our army. So you never know who they are.
Okay, so they're not in a military outfit doing infiltration. They're okay.
The people that catch them are other Koreans. They can spot them a mile away. It's like if you lived in South Georgia and a guy with a New York accent is walking around, you're like, who's this guy?
Yeah. Okay. I thought that perhaps they were infiltrating soldiers. That would be interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so you're there, then you ship out after spending some time, and where do you go from there?
I went to the Captain Careers course, which is like every rank that you advance, you have to go to a school to learn how to be that rank. I did that, because then I got promoted to major, and let's see, I missed something. I did a staff job at Fort Leavenworth. I was in a staff job as a major at Fort Leavenworth, and I got orders to go report to Fort Carson to be a combat advisor. This is in 2005, September 2005. Because they had determined that there was a gap because the line units were having to provide advisors to the Iraqis, which was depleting their combat power. So they decided to have standalone advisors that wouldn't, mess with that. And at that time, those advisors were under central command in Baghdad, Taji area.
So what were you doing on September the 11th?
I was working in Fort Jackson, South Carolina, with a headquarters that trained National Guard units, and we had just got done training the 30th ESB out of South Carolina that deployed to Iraq. Or no, they deployed afterwards, but I was working in that headquarters, and I had just got done with a run, and I walked in the house. And it happened, and my wife and I both watched the second plane hit. And I called Armor Branch and volunteered, but I still had staff work to do before I ended up going.
When you were training them in armor?
Well, they were on armor. I was the team leader, and the way it was structured was they took a major, and you were given 8 subordinates that were captains and senior NCOs. And I was an armor officer, but none of them were even combat arms MOSs. So we were supposed to go advise a tank unit, but when we got to Iraq, they put us in a position where we had to build a battalion of Iraqi, like a truck unit, a transportation battalion. And it also had a security company of Humvees. So in 6 months, the first 6 months I was there, from the ground up, me and these 8 guys built a unit, an Iraqi unit, which is still an Iraqi unit today. At the end of the 6 months, we got retasked to go to the tank battalion, which somebody else had started, but they rotated out of country. And these guys were already in combat. So when we hit the ground in Taji, just north of Baghdad, in 2006, it was game on. It was just combat.
And let's take a step back. When do you go to Iraq? When's the first time?
Well, Desert Storm was the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And then this mission, I had to report in September of 2005. We deployed to Iraq in late December of 2005. We fell in all new equipment, new vehicles, new machine guns, personal locator beacons, nice equipment, night vision devices for the machine guns. I mean, nice stuff. So we outfitted a Taji, and then.
And who are you with when you deploy that second time then?
That's a good question. They called it CMAT. There was a couple different commands. It was the advisory command that was in Baghdad itself, but we were very decentralized. And that kind of became the problem when I got there, was that I was living with the Iraqi officers, who were all former Republican Guard guys. And they're telling me things, and I'm telling the American commanders what the Iraqis are telling me, and the Americans are not listening. They're doing the wrong thing. So I had to detach myself from the American chain of command and fight my own separate war with, me and the Iraqis would go out every day and patrol and fight, and I was not dealing with the Americans at all unless something happened or I needed to.
So at this point, in this, we'll call this your second deployment.
Right.
You are an advisor then.
Right.
And you are helping the Iraqis fight their own war.
Right.
Okay. All right. And
What
type of a unit are you? Is it infantry, tanks?
It's an Iraqi tank battalion.
Okay.
And it used to be one of these Republican Guard units that we fought at Desert Storm. So they have T-72 tanks and BMP-1 armored personnel carriers.
So what do you think about that equipment, having been in your equipment?
Everything about the Iraqis is different, but different doesn't necessarily mean bad. I don't like the T-72 tank, and I'm the kind of person where it says there's no bad tanks, they're just bad crews. And, they're not the most proficient guys in the world. They got a lot of heart. Some of them knew what they were doing, a lot of them didn't. You couldn't tell because they wouldn't tell you the truth. Like, who's been on tanks before? They'd all raise their hands because they want to be on tanks, not that they've ever been on tanks. So it was hard to get the crews. But once, the Iraqi officers took command and crewed their own tanks, they weren't bad, but those autoloaders are hard to maintain on a good day in a nice environment. So, what I brought to them was if I got on the horn and wanted to call Apaches or airstrikes or medevac helicopters or anything, mortars, artillery, that's what I was there for. So they had me as an enabler. So if their equipment didn't really work the way it was supposed to, inshallah, he'll call in an airstrike.
Okay.
But I wouldn't get on them, to answer your question.
And is the T-72, is that Russia's latest, or is that their old stuff that they sent there?
It was mid to late 70s technology. These were depot level rebuilds. They got them out of the depot new, rebuilt from Yugoslavia, who built them under license from Russia.
Okay. So it's older stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Nothing like the M1.
Oh, no. It's like, and there's so much shit inside of it. It's like being inside a wristwatch. And, I can just see you getting your arm ripped off by this autoloader, And the BMP-1 that they had, a lot of these were rebuilt from pieces out of the junkyard. I mean, the BMPs, the tanks they got from the coalition, but the BMPs they built themselves. And most of them, the main guns didn't work, but the machine guns worked. And they were bulletproof, so they were good for patrolling.
Okay, so now you're there 2005?
It's 2006 now.
2006. And you're an advisor. Are you the only one that's an advisor there that's an American, or how does this work?
Let's say a battalion level unit has one advisory team. So that's what I was. And there's 3 battalions in an Iraqi brigade, and each one of those battalions would have an advisory team. So the brigade that is over those 3 battalions also has an advisory guy, but he's a lieutenant colonel. So, we try to keep it close with the rank.
And you said a team, so who with you is part of your team?
I had Captain Ruiz, who was a logistician, Captain Naylor, who was an armor officer, who had just gotten promoted to captain. I had Sergeant First Class Melcher, who was a boat guy, an Army boat guy. And I think he was on his 8th deployment. Sergeant First Class Brown, who was my commo guy, superb at commo. Staff Sergeant Guess was my it'll come to me, but I haven't thought about that part of it so long. Because we ended up doing everything, and Bill Watson was a major that was with me, but he was an intelligence guy, so he focused primarily on intelligence. And the first part of the tour, each guy had, handled logistics to get stuff for the unit that we were building. But the second part, you kind of evolved into we were more dragoons. Like, Sergeant Brown was my gunner. My medic specialist Herb was my driver. It was 3 people on each Humvee. We had 3 Humvees. So we're moving everywhere. We're going everywhere, doing everything.
So later on, you now are in the fighting yourself.
Yes.
You're not just directing it.
Right. No, we are in the fighting. What I figured out with the Iraqis when I got there, I said, okay, to one of the Iraqi lieutenants that had a tank platoon, I said, let's go for a patrol. So I let him lead. Well, he gets in the hatch. He gets about this side in the hatch like he's on a parade on Saddam Field and just drives a mile down the main street and drives back. I was like, oh, no. So I took command of that. We moved out of the American base. I never lived on an American base, but we lived on the Iraqi base that the Americans also had half of it in Taji. So we moved out to a patrol base about the size of a block, but it was walled. It was me and an Iraqi platoon of tanks and an Iraqi section of BMP-1s. So every day when I went on a patrol, we lived outside. We slept on cots by the wall for about 45 days, and every time we'd roll out the gate, it'd be my 3 Humvees. I would lead. We'd have a T-72 tank, and we'd have 2 BMP-1s with a squad of infantry in each one. And we fought like that for a month. Just we'd go to the checkpoints that the unit had and find out what was going on, and then we'd raid that. Raid this, raid that. We'd get orders to clear a whole street. We'd do that. We received indirect fire pretty much every day for the first 2 weeks. We received direct fire from small arms pretty much every day. I called in 1 Apache strike. Got in some good gunfights. I was the only person that got IED'd, and I got IED'd when I was outside of the vehicle at night, trying to clear something, and I always drove on the wrong side of the road because the enemy expects you to use Western traffic laws. Well, I would always drive on the other side of the road. Well, the IED was on the other side of the road, and it blew up, and it was in a hole, and it blew up that way. But I was standing like right there. That's why I can't hear. So I couldn't hear for like 3 days. But not a scratch, not a scratch. So yeah, it was fighting.
And where is this city in Iraq?
Baghdad's in just like the northern central part of Iraq. Highway 1 runs north and south. The length of Iraq, it's Baghdad, and up in here is a town called Sabalbor, which is a bedroom community / retirement community for Republican Guard officers. Saddam's sister had a villa there. It's a town of about 30,000 when I was there, but there was only about 2,000 people there. So it was an urban fight, and you were competing with criminal elements that were trying to rob all the houses that people had vacated. There were Sunni Shia fights going on inside, and then there was the foreign fighters who were getting squeezed out of Ramadi that were trying to establish a base in Sabalbor. So, we made it hard enough for them for 45 days that they quit. None of my guys ever got hurt, but there was American soldiers that got killed there. A lot of my Iraqis got killed, but the enemy never got in, never got to establish a presence.
And who is the enemy? Who would you define them as?
We would have skirmishes with criminals and militias. The Shia militias are bad guys. They're still there. What's his name? It's been so long, but the Shia militias are bad. The foreign fighters the Iranians would bring in professional teams to set up the EFPs, the explosively formed projectiles. It's a copper cone with a lot of C4 wrapped around it. When fire, it'll penetrate our Humvees, no problem. But those guys came into town, and they were setting up these professionally Iranian-made EFPs in North Baghdad area, and a couple of our guys got hit, but we hunted them down too. By the end of the fighting, we had probably captured about 38 guys, and solved a lot of problems, if you know what I mean.
And so you said you were there for about, what, 45 days?
Living outside.
Okay.
And then, because after a period of time, because none of my guys were combat armed soldiers, they were support soldiers, but they learned to be steely-eyed killers very quickly. And they never said no. They never said, they lived outside like that. War story. We had we got done with our morning patrol. We're sitting on our cots, and we would surround ourselves with our vehicles. And I'm just eating my lunch, and I hear a thump, and I look, and from me to the sidewalk over there's a 2.75-inch rocket sticking out of the cement. It didn't go off. And between me and that rocket was 2 boxes of T-72 tank rounds. I got lucky. I got real lucky. I had a couple close calls. I got in a gunfight in a rooftop once, and I had just fired the remainder of my magazine, and I was looking to see where some other, we were fighting in 2 different directions, and my interpreter grabbed me and pulled me down because the bullets were hitting the wall, above me. Didn't even hear it, because when you fire a whole magazine out of an M4, you can't hear anything. Lots of close, nature of the beast, I guess.
Yeah. So how long did that deployment last?
That was a year. I came home on December 16th.
And was it always in that one area, or did you move around from that city?
No, we started the battalion in the Iraqi truck battalion in Numania, which is central Iraq by Al Qut. And after about 3 or 4 months, we had their graduation exercise was to drive to Habaniya, which is in between Fallujah and Ramadi. So we had to take them. Their graduation exercise was to drive this truck battalion in a combat, patrol to their final destination. It was a 15-hour road march. I mean, they made it, but it was gruesome. So we did a month in Habaniya. I went down to Talil, down in the south, saw the Temple of Ur, the Babylonians. Crazy. I mean, that's the cradle of civilization. I saw a lot of interesting things.
Mm-hmm. And then what happens?
Well, we came back, and at the end of that time, after living outside and fighting in Sabal Bor, the vehicles were all broken. My men were just shot. I think I was done, and a lot had gone on, so we just stopped. And we turned our vehicles in to get them serviced. And then the new team showed up, and I went out with them to teach them what I learned and how to do things. And then we got on a plane and came home. I was probably 10 days from my last patrol when I came home.
So about a year?
Yeah, I was there a year.
And so this is now 2007.
Correct.
All right. Okay. And you are now a major?
I'm a major.
Okay.
What did I do after that? They wanted me to come here because they changed the advisor training to Fort Riley. 1st Brigade transitioned to an advisory team training unit. So I came here and I downloaded all the lessons that I learned. I helped them set up their training a little bit, and I did that for a couple years.
Tell me what you mean by downloaded your lessons. That sounds interesting. What is that?
Well, because I had been in so much contact and I thought I was an effective advisor. So they brought me here, and someone told me that your combat skills and relevancy is only good for 6 months, because by then things change. So I was able to, I wrote down everything. It's like 7 or 8 pages of lessons learned. And I would give presentations to the teams that were going to go into Iraq. And, a lot of them lost their lives, it was a hard business. So I felt very fortunate that I came home with my team.
What were some of your top lessons? And they can just be simple ones, but something that they may not have normally prepared for that you thought was important.
I would say the number one thing that I taught them was that advising is based on personality. You have to have the right disposition to be an advisor. And then number 2 is, if you don't understand the cultural chain of events that brought them to where they are now and why you're going there, then you won't succeed. And you have to learn enough of their language that you can function, and you have to choose your interpreters very, very carefully, because what comes out of their mouth is what you're saying. And I had some real lessons learned with the interpreters.
Give me an example of the cultural lesson, that where they were and how they got there, that you thought was important.
Well, one officer, the first officer that I served with, advised, was a Iraqi lieutenant colonel, but he was of Kurdish descent. And he actually was ordered to destroy or attack his own hometown in Kurdistan when he was a tank commander under Saddam. And he told me a story about how he had to sneak in at night and warn everybody, so everybody was gone when they came in. So he was a different kind of officer than my next guy, who was a Sunni, former Republican Guard officer, very proud. And I could not approach him he was a colonel and I was a major. So I had to salute him every day. I brought him gifts, and because he was the senior officer there. And I understood my role was not to dominate him and tell him what to do. My role was to help him. And as much as I'm trying to help him, I'm also trying to help him understand Americans so he can deal with Americans besides me more effectively.
How was that relationship?
I had a great relationship with Colonel Ali. It was a really sad and tragic end, because right about the time I was getting ready to leave, his brother had his head cut off because the insurgents found out, the Shia militias found out that he was in the army. Yeah. Brutal.
So he lost his brother.
Yeah. They cut his brother's head off and threw it over the wall into his parents' garden.
All right, so now you're here in Fort Riley, and you're giving lessons and training the new group of advisors. And what do you do from there?
I trained the advisors for a while. They even had me go out to the National Training Center in Fort Irwin, and I would help the advisory teams that would go through rehearsals with you, stuff like that. But then, it was time for me to go. I'd done as a major, you do a year as a executive officer and a year as an S3 planning officer. So I'd done all that, so it was my time to move. And my commander told me that they were probably going to send me back to Iraq again for a year as an advisor again, but he recommended that I take a job in Afghanistan, which was a 6-month tasker that was up a division. So I was like, oh, hell yeah. So I volunteered for this tasker to go to Afghanistan.
What's a tasker?
Like, the Department of the Army needs people in staff positions, so you deploy as an individual instead of with a unit. So, like, they're fillers, individual replacements. So Fort Riley had gotten this tasker and sent it down to my brigade, and I said, I'll take it. Because, a lot of people aren't eligible for it. I was. And, I wanted to go see Afghanistan. So I was...
You're married at this point.
Yeah, with 2 kids.
All right, and how's your wife handling this?
Well, I told her, I said, I'm not going to be fighting in this one. And I wasn't. I rode around with a gun, helped guys out, but I never fired my weapon once in Afghanistan.
How did she handle Iraq?
I had a satellite phone because I was a team leader, and everybody got to talk to their wife once a day. You get a 20-minute a day call. So I got to talk to my wife every single day I was in Iraq. In fact, a mortar went off near me, like when I was on the phone with her once, stuff like that. But she was a bit of a wreck at first, but I explained to her that I was volunteering for a staff job so I wouldn't have to take another combat job. Because I'd had enough.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd done enough as far as I was concerned.
How many combat missions do you think you went out on in Iraq?
300. And I led every single one of them, that except when I was home on leave.
And are most of these combat missions you're trying to go get the bad guy? Find them? Grab them?
Yes.
And how did you get that intelligence? From locals?
Nobody in Iraq is altruistic. Like, we had a kid, he was probably about 15, come to my base there where we were living outside and say, there's bad men here, you need to come arrest them. They're, doing bad things. And everybody's like, trap. So we go, and we put him in a mask so he could ride in the Humvee with us, he'll be safe. And but I kind of know what's going to happen here. So we pull in the neighborhood, and the house he points at has got a big RPG hole in it, like this big. And there's a little boy appearing, looking at me out this hole. I'm like, okay, hold on. So I get out of the Humvee. So everybody stay here. My brave Sergeant Brown is on the gun, because we're right in this town, And I knock on the door with my interpreter, and I said, what's going on? Why did they bring me here? And he explains to me that they're Sunni, and all the Shias are taking over the neighborhood, and they're trying to get them out. So I said, who's the leader? He points to the house about 6 houses down. I said, thank you. Have a nice day. Turned everybody around. We circled that house. I led, kicked the door in. There's a homeboy sitting on the couch, AK-47 right by him. Got some woman cooking for him. I was like, he's like, come in. I'm like, I'm in. And he had an RPG. He had been shooting at ambulances, and he was a big Sunni cell leader. So that's just I got 24 of those stories.
Okay. All right. So now you're going out to Afghanistan. What year is this?
I got notified in 2009. So I reported at Fort Benning on the 4th of July, 2009.
All right. Oh, let's not forget, going back, sorry. What was your most memorable moment from your second deployment in Iraq? Don't want to tell that one?
Coming home was nice.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. All right. So 2009. You are now heading to Afghanistan. Where are you going?
I go to Kabul, and I get there, and keep in mind I'm an individual replacement. So I get to Kabul airport, and I'm not really sure where I'm supposed to go. So they got a phone number, and I call it, but they say, well, we're not coming out till the morning. So I just sleep in these transient barracks in the Kabul airport. The next day, somebody comes and gets me, brings me to the headquarters of, it's called NKC, which is New Kabul Compound is what it's called. It's basically a big bomb-proof building with a wall around it in downtown Kabul. And they figure out that I'm going to be working for, it's called SIF-SOC Alpha, Combined Forces Special Operations Component Command, Afghanistan.
That's quite an acronym.
Yeah, it is. So I go there, and I'm in an office, not much bigger than this room, with a couple of Navy SEALs, a Delta Force Sergeant Major, some Special Forces Master Sergeants, and me, Tony the Tanker. So, I help them with staff projects that because armor officers make good staff officers. They just do. It's just something we're good at. And special forces guys are good at kicking indoors and things like that, and sometimes they're not real good at staff work. So I filled a gap for them, helped them out where I could.
And describe some of this staff work. What is it that you're good at?
Well, we figured out Afghanistan was broken up into four quarters, and regional command north, one of those four, north, south, east, and west, was having trouble because the medevac requirement was being handled by the Germans. And the Germans wouldn't fly in sand, they wouldn't fly in high winds, and they wouldn't fly at night. So the special forces guys who mentored the commando battalions were having trouble, and they were losing people because they couldn't get timely medevac. It would have to be ad hoc by other special forces units that were driving around out there. So what I did was, as a staff officer, I stole 4 helicopters from the 82nd Airborne Division who were using them for VIP flights, and they were dedicated solely to the guys up there in regional command. So that's one thing I do.
All right. So you're trying to meet the needs and requirements of the operations.
Right. And I'm going to tell this story. I've never told this story, but this is the biggest lie I ever told. In October of 2009, the commander of Afghanistan, which is McChrystal, requested a surge, 30,000 people. I'm in the room with a one-star, Brigadier General Reeder, because I'm his force manager, because I did force management stuff.
What's force management?
Like making sure they got everything they need, like working dogs, whatever they need. So, or just, from the, staffing part of it. So, the Washington, Barack Obama had told Special Forces to reduce their presence in country, personnel-wise, by 10%. Now, that's a lot. At the time, that was a significant number. And people who go into combat with units, there's no dead weight. Everybody has a job that does something. You can't just arbitrarily say, oh, take 10% off like it's a sale. You can't do that. So General Reeder, who was just a knuckle-dragging killer, just a great man, he was about to be fit to be tied. And I looked at him, I said, hey, sir, I got it. You don't have to do a thing. Nothing's going to change. Just let me handle it. So what I did was I got all their rosters, and because Special Forces is not one big unit, it's a bunch of little units. So it's kind of complicated. I took all the people that were going home anyway, so I would submit these lists of people that were going home anyway to the headquarters and saying, these are the people we're sending home. And I did this for about 3 months, and then that was the 10%. And it was just a regular rotation. Nothing changed. So nobody had to go home from Special Forces in 2010 because of that lie I told. That's a good lie.
Okay. All right. So what else is happening in 2000? Well, first, how long are you in Afghanistan for?
6 months.
All right. And what else happens there?
Well, in Kabul, they would make car bombs in Jalalabad, and once every 2 weeks they'd finish one and drive down the road and bring it into Kabul and blow something up. And so, our biggest excitement was, massive car bombs every 2 weeks. And there was rockets would come in every now and then, but nothing crazy. The biggest one was, there was a massive car bomb right outside of Camp Eggers, I think. And it was summertime, and this is in Kabul, so it's a street. And this is like fancy street since the 50s. So these big hardwood trees with big canopies of leaves over the street. And when the car bomb went off, it blew off all those leaves. So one day they're there, the next day they're all on the ground. And it was that, to me, there's your most memorable moment for that one.
So a nice, lovely street.
Beautiful street, beautiful trees, and then the next day, all of the leaves are on the ground.
And was this area in Kabul kind of like a green zone? Is that?
Yes, it's that area where the embassy, not the embassy, because the embassy is a standalone building somewhere else. But that whole area, NKC, there's I forget, United Nations maybe. Camp Eggers. It's where all the former Russian, headquarters. We took them over and turned them into ours. Yeah.
All right. So you're 6 months there, and then what? You returned to the States?
Came back to the States. Oh, I got promoted to lieutenant colonel in Afghanistan, and I came back, and I knew that I was getting close to retirement. Because I didn't command a battalion, I wasn't selected to command a battalion, and I was not going to get promoted to colonel, full colonel. And
How do you know that?
Well, because that's just the way the Army works. There's certain gates that you have to meet as an officer, and if you don't meet those gates, you're not going to command.
What was the gate that was
being
holding
selected
you
for Command and General Staff College.
up? Okay.
So I never went, and things really started to pick up because of the war. And I wasn't selected to go, and they wanted me to do a correspondence. I'm like, I'm not doing that correspondence. No way. So
What's correspondence?
like at home.
Oh.
Yeah. Like
So attend that course at home.
yeah. No.
And that wouldn't qualify you though to be promoted, or?
Well, it would, but I knew that they're not going to pick a guy for promotion who wasn't selected for Command and General Staff College but did a correspondence. That's like, somebody getting a degree from a community college versus a guy who went to MIT. So I knew that I was going to retire because who wants to be part of an organization that's not going to promote you? Don't get me wrong, I'm grateful. I've had a wonderful career, but I knew that it was my time to go. So when I hit 3 years in grade as a lieutenant colonel, I retired. But my next job after Afghanistan was I went to the Fort Leavenworth, and they have a unit there that travels to all the units in the Army to train them before they go to combat on staff procedures and best practices, lessons learned, things like that. So I worked for them for 3 years, but then I retired out of there.
And you were training those folks to do just that.
Things that I could, where I could help,
Okay. And some of your lessons still applied from what you learned from
Oh,
Iraq,
Oh, yeah.
and all that good stuff?
Yeah, but everybody's got to learn them lessons themselves,
Okay.
Army guys are hard-headed that way.
And so how long were you, at the end of the day, in the military?
23 years and 3 months, I think.
And you mentioned that you got injured one time from that IED that really messed up your hearing.
Uh-huh.
Okay, did you receive any awards or medals?
I got a Bronze Star for Iraq and a Bronze Star for Afghanistan.
What was the write-up for those Bronze Stars? What did you do?
Here, you can read it.
Oh.
Well, yeah, I'm hooked up.
Just if you can recall briefly.
I can recall because I wrote it.
Okay.
The one for Iraq I did. Now, everybody in my team got a Bronze Star.
Okay.
And one of the issues that was a problem in Iraq at that time was that nobody could give a rat's ass about the advisors. We had to scrounge our own ammo. We had to scrounge our own food, gas, everything. And at that time, it got better later. But at that time, nobody could write an award for me because nobody knew what I'd done. So at one point, when I was getting close to do this, my senior rater, the guy who's going to decide what my evaluation looks like, he's never met me. So he comes and goes on a patrol with me. So we stop at a few places on the way to town. But right about the time that we're going to go into town, he's like, okay, I've seen enough, because the town was terrible. Because all the Iraqi towns are kind of like walled. So we'd hit a couple checkpoints on the way to the town, but he wasn't going into town. So I guess a way to get a good evaluation from your senior rater is to scare him.
All right. And then the second Bronze Star, how was that written up? What was that for?
That's more of a participation kind of award, for being there and doing stuff.
Okay.
Not any specific action.
Okay. Same thing with the first?
Yeah.
All right.
Like I said, there was nobody there to see what was going on. I was fighting my own war.
And would you write up awards for your troopers?
Yeah, I gave them all Bronze Stars.
Okay.
And they got approved.
And did you have any type of authority to do the same for the Iraqi soldiers that you were advising?
That is an amazing question, and I'm glad you asked it, because one of my lessons learned was, because I went to the supply guy at the unit that we were sharing a battle space with, and I got a bunch of, medals, and I did give guys medals, and I told them that that's a generational impact right there.
Mm-hmm.
You give some Iraqi private a medal for doing something good. I mean, he'll have that as an old man.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's a good question.
And in your time in any of these campaigns, did you have any conversations with the enemy? They were interrogating them.
Oh yeah. We zipped up lots of guys.
And do you remember any that were interesting?
I'll tell you my favorite one. I got two that are noteworthy. The first one, there was a foreign fighter. He was a Syrian sniper, and he'd already killed a couple of my guys. And I got a call that there were some people shooting at civilians, and they gave me a grid coordinate in the town. So I traveled through. I didn't go use main roads because they had guys on the rooftops that would wave black flags when we approached. So I would travel, and they could hear me, but they didn't know where I was. So I would travel these alleys, these really tight alleys, and it would be so tight you couldn't open your door unless you cleared the alley. So we busted out, and there they were, right in front of us in a clearing, of these houses, and we jumped out, and one guy threw down his weapon and started running, and I was like, "Oh, you can't get away from this scot-free." So I brought my rifle up, and I went bam, 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 and I must have put 5 rounds right in front of his face when he was running, and there was a wall right here. So I was hopefully, scared him that he's probably still running, but I didn't kill him. But then we chased down the Syrian sniper. My Iraqis ran him down, and they had him on the ground and 3 of his guys, and they were trying to hide their weapons. And it's a real insult, bottom of your foot. So I put the bottom of my foot on his neck, and I got down close to him, and I have an interpreter. And I said, "Oh, you're in trouble now." I said, "You didn't get captured by the Americans." I said, "You got captured by the Iraqis, and they're going to torture you to death." And then I got up, and obviously that's not going to happen. But, the spoken word is very powerful in those situations. So I put him in the back of my Humvee, and he had Syrian money, $100 bills, which means he came through the foreign fighter pipeline and all that. And like I said, he'd killed a few of my guys. And he wet himself in my Humvee. He was so scared. I got pictures of all of this. Believe me. It's modern war. We got pictures. Mm-hmm. So, and the battalion commander of the American unit that I was paired with had warned me several times about this sniper. Look out for the sniper. And every time I see him in the mess hall, he goes, "Look out for that sniper in Salo Bor." So I saw him in the mess hall because whenever we do something good, remove someone from the battlefield, we'd go get a cheeseburger at the American mess hall. So we're getting our cheeseburger after rounding up all these guys. And the Iraqis and my guys are processing them, because it's an Iraqi catch. It's their victory. And the Americans, found him so valuable, they grabbed him and they processed him. They took him. So who knows what happened to him. The other one was the town I was in, we were getting mortared just mercilessly. I mean, it's just really bad. It's killing civilians, and, it's just a mess. So the American commander wanted me to go out 2 miles into Indian-held, territory and stop this. I'm like, "Are you crazy?" But I said, I'll go this far out, which was probably about a kilometer. And there's a farmhouse there that I knew was kind of sketchy. So I take a platoon of Iraqi tanks, my 3 vehicles. I got some assets overhead, jamming all the cell phone communications so they can't initiate IEDs. And it's nighttime, and I bust into this room, and there they are. There's like 15 dudes sitting there around this rug, having tea, talking to this one dude in the middle. I'm like, what is going on here? So the Iraqis start talking to the other guys, and I grabbed the honcho, and I'd been there so long, and I was so sharp and knew so much about what was going on. I go, "Who are you?" And he goes, "I'm just a simple farmer." Well, he's got expensive glasses, he's got an expensive watch, he's got expensive, I said, "Oh, no. So I zipped him up immediately and took him back to the Americans. And sure enough, when they searched him, he had like 10 phone numbers tucked in his underwear, and 3 of them were for Al Qaeda guys that they were already tracking. So, victory.
Yeah.
Then the Americans let him go.
Why?
That was a problem. That was a real problem. I don't know. But that action right there resulted in my Iraqi commander getting his brother's head cut off. So we had to amend the way we did things after that, because I would give the Americans the chance to do the right thing. If they held on to him and put him in prison, whatever, great. But if they gave him back to me, because I didn't bring them guys that I think were guilty. I mean, these were people that were shooting at me.
Mm-hmm.
So if they gave him back to me and they said, release him where you picked him up, I'd give him to the Iraqis. You figure it out. Not you figure it out. I knew what was. They would talk to him and they would know whether or not they were bad, good, and then they would adjudicate that with their own justice system. And
yeah, I was very surprised that you took the Syrian sniper alive, given what he was doing.
well, I mean, I sleep at night. Everybody who was removed from the battlefield as a result of my actions deserved to do so, to be taken off the battlefield. That tour broke my heart, because you don't know evil like that exists until you see it with your own eyes.
Well, that leads me, ironically, to my next question.
Sure.
You've heard of the phrase "war is hell," haven't you?
Yes.
You agree with that statement?
Yes.
How so?
I'll give you an anecdote that'll explain what I'm talking about. I think war is hell. It is the worst of all human experiences. Our souls were not meant to take lives and to see lives taken. That being said, when I came home, there was a Cub Scout group that was corresponding to me that was a friend of a family member on my wife's side. And I have all of it written down. I wrote every day what happened, and it's in a box over there. I haven't read it since I wrote it. I figure someday my kids will write a book or whatever. But they invited me to come speak to them afterwards. And after I kind of told my story, some of the fathers in this Cub Scout group, the kids started really giving me a hard time about the politics of the war. And I get it, but I shudder to think what would have happened if me and my team weren't there, because I saved infinitely more than I killed. We saved a lot of people, from being killed. And if we hadn't put ourselves in front of harm, these people in harm's way, how much worse would it have been? So yes, war is hell, but some people are designed to go in there and do that.
When you would go out on some of these missions, I guess we're talking about your second tour in Iraq, when you're nabbing the bad guys with your Iraqi team. Did you all have like any kind of habits or rituals or superstitions you would do before you go out? I ask this of everybody because I'm
everybody's
curious.
got an answer, don't they?
Yeah.
Okay, so there was 2. There was I didn't do the same thing for the whole year, but this one portion of the time that I was there, I told you about when I was in Habbaniyah, and we had to drive from Habbaniyah through Fallujah, down Route Irish, Route Michigan, to Baghdad, to a base called Rustamiyah, and this is the most dangerous roads in Iraq. And I would always do it at 2 in the morning, because I figured everybody's done with what they're doing by 2 in the morning. But I got a security company to come with us, because I had to move this whole battalion, like 125 vehicles on a convoy.
Is this the 15-hour gruesome?
No, this is additional ones.
This is a different
That's
one.
after that. This is through like towns. So that group, we would always get together, all of us, and somebody would say a prayer, because that was some dangerous shit. But the one that my team did, every time we rolled during that time in Taji when we were going on patrols, we'd play Riding Dirty. It's a song.
Okay.
Patrolling rolling, trying to get me right down. So that was our. We play that, and then over the headphones, and everybody we roll out.
Okay. You've seen your fair share of people getting shot, though, right?
Yes.
And the good, the bad, on both sides. Do you ever get used to that over time?
Yeah, you sure do. It's not that you get used to it; you get desensitized to it. Like I said, who I was when I was there is a very, very different person than who I am right now. I'm a stay-at-home dad artist. That impenetrable armor of indoctrination and combat experience and exposure that I had by October of 2006. I was not afraid of being killed. I was not afraid of being wounded. I was afraid of nothing. I mean, I was cautious. I wasn't careless with my life, but I wouldn't react to that now. Very different.
Is there anything from your experience from your operations that you were involved in that you brought home with you?
Oh yeah. It changed me as a person, and I had struggles when I came back, and I've some people ask me to talk about it, and what I tell them is the first thing you have to do is realize that you've changed. You have to identify how you've changed, and then you have to take steps to mitigate. Because none of the changes are good. Like Tony came back and his hair is so much better. No, it's like every change that happens to you is bad. So I quit drinking liquor. I only do beer and wine. I rarely leave the house. Rarely leave the house. Don't have a car. I have 3 cars, but none of them are mine. I'm rated about 70% for PTSD from the VA. I mean, I function. I'm good, but I realize there's certain situations I can't put myself in because you never stop being that guy that's clearing a corner. I mean, it's always there. They change you. That's who you are. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't work out here at all.
All right. And your last combat experience was how long ago?
November of 2006.
All right. So almost 15 years ago.
Yeah.
And you're still in a way that person. It changed you then, and you brought that home today.
Yes.
And is it safe to say that you kind of suppress that, or how do you reconcile that? Are you working with that person? How does that? I'm trying to get other people to understand what you're going through, because most people probably don't.
I would say that when you wake up in the morning, it's right there. It's a Rolodex of images or events that could pop into your head. As soon as you wake up, they pop in and out. Every day before you go to bed. So you have to find ways to manage that. And I've found ways to manage that. I stand there for hours, making beautiful glass. So I mean, if that kind of violence and brutality was an engine that, for the rest of my life, if I crank those out, maybe try to make something beautiful, I'll do that. So if you want to make somebody understand, it's like, okay, you come back from a war and you still got your rucksack on and it weighs 40 pounds. You can walk around with 40 pounds for a long time, but, walk around with 40 pounds for 15 years. Mm-hmm. It wears a lot of guys down. I deployed to Iraq that second time on my 40th birthday. I mopped a bathroom, mopped a latrine, got on a plane, and flew to Kuwait.
What type of things do you do to deal with your Rolodex? You mentioned your art.
Right.
Is there any, do you do like meditation or exercise, or what other things do you do?
I found that because various and sundry, things have broken on me and I can't, my wrist arthritis, hands arthritis. I'm not complaining. I mean, just nature of the beast. But I found one thing I can do on a consistent basis without it, hurting me, is rucking. So I can put on a rucksack and go for a walk. I can do push-ups. So exercise is part of my day every day. I got a very strong wife who put up with a lot, and because I like to call them episodes. You have these episodes, and it's like I'm not even me. I don't even know who I am at that point.
Do you feel comfortable sharing what one of those might be like?
Back when I was drinking bourbon, that was a problem because I would get angry, and I still have anger issues. I do, and I don't like people to see me angry in public because I get angry, and it's like not the kind of angry anybody else gets or any. It's like you really got to throw a chair in front of it because it's just unreasonable. I punched a door upstairs, put a hole in the door after getting in a fight with my daughter. Liquor is the worst enemy for somebody with post-traumatic stress. I tell every guy that'll listen, get off the booze.
Some actually, from what I understand, look to that to make it go away. But you're saying it's the opposite.
No, it's the worst thing in the world for it. Worst thing in the world for it. You can think of other things that don't make you angry that help.
Some others seek adrenaline, do risky things to cope with it.
Oh, I'm done with risky things. Yeah, I'm good on the risky things. I'm serious. I'm done. I've seen enough.
And how do you deal with the images or the sleeping? I mean, you see someone or talk to somebody, or how do you work on that?
I do something before I go to bed that knocks me out, so I don't dream. I still have nightmares, but that really reduces it. What I do.
When you returned back, you know what hypervigilance is, right?
Yes.
Did you have that kind of a habit of?
Yeah, I'm still there.
You're still doing security,
Well, it's just
scanning.
It's like predatory behavior. You're always looking. You're always aware of everybody in the room. It's like you when I'm driving, it's like everything. I'm not unreasonable with it, but I'm walking down the sidewalk and there's a bag of trash on the side. I'm looking at it. I know that my mind is telling that's just a bag of trash, but I'm still doing it,
Because you think it might be an IED. I mean,
Just
your initial instinct.
Yeah, my initial thing, and then that's just a bag of trash. But
Do you belong to any veterans groups?
I started one. Short answer, no. I tried to do the Veterans of Foreign Wars when I came back, but it didn't really work out. They weren't really into the new guys, so that didn't work out. And so I just kind of moved away from that. Like I said, I don't get out of the house much. What I did do was my wife works for the Chamber of Commerce, and she's the military liaison for the city of Fort Riley. And so she is a big part of putting on the parade, the Veterans Day parade every year. So this year I always go with her, and I'm just watch the parade. I'm watching the parade, and I see a bunch of guys I know who are Iraq and Afghanistan veterans watching the parade. I'm like, why aren't we in the parade? So I started a Facebook page for Manhattan, Kansas, Iraq and Afghanistan veterans for the purpose of getting together, having a beer, and then go march in the parade.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's good. And is there a reason why you don't get out much? So you don't leave the house too often?
I don't. I just prefer not to. Like I said, I don't like to expose these nice people of Manhattan, Kansas to sometimes what I do or can become, and it's just better if I just keep it here,
And the driving, you don't drive anymore. Why?
Well, I drive, but I just don't like to. I drove to Atlanta and back a couple weeks ago, but Yeah, I don't like to. No.
Same reason for not wanting to leave the house?
It's just, like I said, you come back a different person.
Is it too much
I don't like
stimulation?
It's a lot of stimulation. I don't really like talking to people that much. That's just kind of the way it is.
Well, I'm glad that you're talking with me.
I'm happy to talk to you.
Is there anything you would like to add that I did not ask you?
Since this is, an interview that may last a period of time, that I hope that the advisory mission in Iraq is re-examined for the contribution that it made. Because there was a lot of brave Iraqis that wanted to defend their country, and we gave them the tools to do it. And my men served honorably, and at a great cost to ourselves. We did our duty.
Mm-hmm. And a similar but related question: is there anything you would like to tell future generations, and any words of wisdom or advice?
This is the greatest country in the world, and it's worth defending. The people that think the Iraq War wasn't necessary didn't have to deal with a terrorist who, if they didn't come through the foreign fighter pipeline to fight us every day, day in, day out for 10 years, they would have found a way to do it somewhere else in some other American interest. So, I feel for the Iraqi people, but, you do the best you can, where you can, with what you can.
Well said. Well, Tony, I'm honored to have sat here and listened to your story. I want to thank you for taking the time, and I want to thank you for your very long and distinguished military career and service to our country.
Oh, thank you very much. I enjoyed talking to you. Absolutely.
All right. Thank you.